Part 2. 1 year passed in the darkness. The tunnels became their new home. Hyun-soo spent his days studying the ancient technology they had found. The symbols on the walls taught him things that human science hadn't discovered yet. He learned how to build weapons that used light and gravity as ammunition. He learned how to make armor that bent light around it, making the wearer invisible. The others learned too. Subin, the teacher, became a student again. She memorized every piece of information from the ancient database. Jia stopped crying and started training. She learned to fight. She learned to hate. Hae-won turned the old communication equipment into something new. She could now hack into Raltesh systems and listen to their conversations. Daeho watched his people transform. Farmers became soldiers. Teachers became engineers. Gentle people became hard. He felt guilty about it sometimes. But guilt was a luxury they couldn't afford. The Raltesh had built a mining colony on the surface. They were taking resources from Talon 4, stripping the planet bare. Hae-won intercepted their communications and translated them. The Raltesh commander was named Vexel. He bragged about destroying the human settlement. He called it pest control. "It's time," Daeho said one morning. "We're ready for the first strike." Tae-young led the mission. He took 20 people with him. They wore the new armor that Hyun-soo had built. The armor made them nearly invisible. They carried weapons that could cut through Raltesh metal like paper. They moved through the tunnels until they reached a mining outpost on the surface. The attack happened at night. The Raltesh never saw them coming. One moment the guards were standing at their posts. The next moment they were dead, silent, efficient. 20 Raltesh workers tried to run. None of them made it. Before they left, Tae-young arranged the bodies in a specific pattern. When viewed from above, they spelled words in the Raltesh language. The words said, "Remember Cascade." Commander Vexel saw the message the next morning. He was confused. All the humans were supposed to be dead. He decided it must be another species attacking them. Maybe a rival faction. He didn't believe humans could do this. The second attack came 2 weeks later. Then a third. Then a fourth. Each time the invisible humans struck and disappeared. Each time they left the same message. Each time they stole Raltesh equipment and brought it back to the tunnels. Hyun-soo took apart the stolen technology and made it better. He combined Raltesh engineering with the ancient designs. The result was weapons that no one in the galaxy had ever seen. Plasma rifles that never overheated. Grenades that created small black holes. Suits that let a person walk on walls. The raids continued for months. Jia proved to be one of the best fighters. She was fast and fearless. She had lost her gentleness, but she had gained something else. Purpose. Every Raltesh she killed was revenge for her mother. Hae-won became their secret weapon. She didn't fight directly, but her work was just as deadly. She hacked into Raltesh communications and fed them false information. She made them think attacks were coming from the wrong direction. She made their supply ships go to the wrong coordinates. She turned their own technology against them. The Raltesh soldiers started calling the attackers phantoms. They were terrified. Soldiers refused to go on patrol alone. Some deserted their posts. The fear spread like disease. After 6 months of raids, Commander Vexel sent a message to the Raltesh homeworld. He asked for reinforcements. He admitted that something was hunting his forces. He didn't say it was humans. He still couldn't believe that. The Raltesh High Command sent an investigator. Her name was Kreshtal, and she was known for being ruthless. She arrived with 300 elite soldiers. She immediately started hunting for the phantoms. Kreshtal was smart. She analyzed the attack patterns. She studied the bodies. She noticed that the weapons were too advanced for most species in this region. She started to suspect the truth. "Bring me the records from the bombardment," she ordered. The records showed that Cascade Valley had been completely destroyed. Nothing could have survived. But Kreshtal noticed something. There were old mining tunnels listed in the geological surveys. Tunnels that went deep underground. "Search every tunnel," she commanded. "Seal every entrance. I want whatever is hiding down there brought to me." Daeho learned about the search from Hae-won's intercepts. He gathered the survivors in the main chamber. "They're coming for us," he said. "We need to split up. Smaller groups. More mobile. They can't catch us all if we're spread out." The 258 survivors divided into 10 teams. Each team took supplies and weapons. Each team was assigned different sections of the tunnel network. Some tunnels had to be collapsed to slow the Raltesh search teams. During one collapse, Subin almost lost all her records. She had been documenting everything. Every battle, every name of the dead, every small victory. The falling rocks buried her equipment, but Taeyang pulled her out just in time. She clutched her data drives like they were children. "This is our story," she said. "If we die, someone needs to know what happened here." The tunnel war became desperate. The Raltesh soldiers had scanners and heavy weapons. The humans had knowledge of the terrain and desperation. Sometimes they fought in darkness so complete that both sides were blind. They learned to fight by sound and memory. Jia's team encountered a Raltesh patrol in a narrow passage. The fight was brutal and close. She felt Raltesh blood splatter on her face. She heard them clicking and hissing in pain. When it was over, 5 Raltesh were dead. 2 humans were wounded. They couldn't win by fighting. There were too many Raltesh and too few humans. Daeho knew they needed to change the game completely. "We're thinking too small," he told the other team leaders. "We keep attacking their mining operations. But that's not where we hurt them. We need to think bigger." Haewon had an idea. "I've been monitoring their communications with the homeworld. Most of their fleet is spread across the frontier. The capital world is defended, but not heavily. They're overconfident." "How far is their homeworld?" Daeho asked. 3 months of travel with their fastest ships, Haewon said. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what Daeho was thinking. It was insane, impossible. 258 humans couldn't attack the capital of an empire, but then again, 258 humans weren't supposed to survive orbital bombardment either. "We need allies," Hyunsu said. "We can't do this alone." "The Raltesh have enslaved other species," Subin added. "Species that hate them as much as we do." Daeho nodded slowly. "Then we find them. We unite them. We build a fleet, and we hit the Raltesh where they feel safest." Jia smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had found a reason to keep fighting. "When do we start?" she asked. "Now," Daeho said. "We start now." In the tunnels beneath a dead valley, a small group of humans began planning the impossible. They would take the war to the heart of the empire that tried to erase them. They would show the galaxy what happened when you underestimated human beings. The phantoms were about to become something much more dangerous. Part 3, finding allies, was harder than fighting. Daeho sent Jia and Haewon on the first contact mission. They took a stolen Raltesh shuttle and traveled to a planet called Vel. The Velan people lived there. They looked like large mammals with fur and kind eyes. Before the Raltesh came, they had been peaceful. Now they were slaves. Jia and Haewon landed in secret and made contact with the Velan resistance. The Velan leader was named Tor. He was old and scarred. He didn't trust humans at first. "Why should we believe you?" Tor asked. "Humans are weak. The Raltesh destroyed your settlement in hours." Jia showed him the scars on her arms from the bombardment. "They tried," she said. "We're still here, and we're going to make them pay. With or without you." She showed him videos of the raids. She showed him the weapons Hyunsu had built. She showed him something else too. "Hope. We're not asking you to die for us," Haewon explained. "We're asking you to fight for yourselves. We'll provide weapons and training. Together we can hurt them." Tor looked at his people. They were thin and tired. Children who should have been playing worked in factories instead. The elderly died from overwork. He made his decision. "We'll fight," he said. "Tell us what you need." The network grew. The Velan knew other enslaved species. There were the Kel, who lived in water and were forced to mine underwater resources. There were the Drax, small but clever beings who the Raltesh used as technicians. Each species had been hurt by the Empire. Each species wanted revenge. Daeho met with representatives from 7 different species. They gathered in an abandoned space station on the edge of Raltesh territory. It was the first time so many enemies of the Empire had met together. "We're all weak alone," Daeho said. "But together we're strong. The Raltesh think we're broken. Let's show them we're not." The others agreed. But they had questions. How would they fight? Where would they strike? What was the goal? Hyunsu presented his plan. "We build a fleet. We use stolen Raltesh ships and upgrade them with the ancient technology. We train crews from all our species, and we hit their capital." The room exploded in argument. Attack the capital? That was suicide. The defenses would destroy them. It was impossible. "Everything we've done was impossible," Jia said quietly. Her voice cut through the noise. "We survived bombardment. We fought an empire with 200 people. We built weapons from buried technology. We made them fear us. What's one more impossible thing? Sufin showed them intelligence that Haywan had gathered. Most of their fleet is on the frontier. The capital is defended, but not as heavily as you think. They believe they're safe. That's their weakness. And if we take their capital, Taeyang added, we cut off the head of the empire. The rest will fall. Slowly, the other species began to see it. The plan was crazy, but it might work. More importantly, it gave them something they had lost. A chance. The alliance formed that day. 7 species united against a common enemy. They called themselves the Cascade Alliance, named after the valley where it all began. Building the fleet took 2 years. It was the hardest work any of them had ever done. The humans taught the others how to modify Raltesh ships. The Velen provided raw materials they stole from mines. The Kel used their water-world resources to cool the advanced reactors. The Drax redesigned the control systems to be faster and more efficient. Hidden in asteroid fields and abandoned systems, they built 47 ships. The largest one they named Cascade's Revenge. Daeho would command it personally. Hyun-Soo never stopped working. He combined human determination with ancient genius and Raltesh engineering. The result was a fleet unlike anything in the galaxy. Their ships were smaller than Raltesh warships, but faster and more deadly. Their weapons could punch through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. Training the crews was Jia's responsibility. She was only 26 now, but she had the eyes of someone much older. She trained humans alongside Velen, Kel, and Drax. They learned to work together, fight together, trust each other. Not everyone believed it would work. Some of the older survivors from Cascade Valley thought Daeho had gone mad. They had a good life in the tunnels now. Why risk it all on an impossible attack? Because hiding isn't living, Daeho told them. Because our children deserve better than to hide in darkness forever. Because they tried to erase us and we need to show them they failed. Subin continued to document everything. Her records had grown massive. She recorded every ship built, every person trained, every small success and failure. She knew this story was important no matter how it ended. Haywan spent months creating the perfect deception. She needed to draw the Raltesh fleet away from the capital. She created fake signals suggesting a massive human base on a frontier world. She planted evidence in intercepted communications. She made it look real. Commander Vexel took the bait. He was still hunting for the phantoms after 3 years. He was obsessed. When intelligence suggested a major human stronghold, he volunteered to lead the attack personally. Finally, he told his officers, we'll crush these vermin once and for all. He gathered 60% of the Raltesh fleet and headed for the frontier. Investigator Kreshtal was suspicious. Something felt wrong, but she was overruled. The High Command wanted results. The fake base was real enough to fool scanners. Taeyang had volunteered to command the garrison there. He knew it was a suicide mission. When the Raltesh fleet arrived, he would have to hold them as long as possible. I'm not afraid, Taeyang told Daeho before he left. My death will mean something. It will give you time to end this. Daeho embraced him. We'll remember you. All of us will remember. Just win, Taeyang said. That's all the memorial I need. When the Raltesh fleet jumped to the frontier, the Cascade Alliance fleet launched. 47 ships carrying 2,000 fighters. Humans, Velen, Kel, Drax, and others, all united by one goal. They traveled through hyperspace toward Raltos Prime, the capital of the Raltesh Empire. The journey took 3 weeks. During that time, people prepared in their own ways. Some prayed. Some trained. Some wrote final messages to loved ones who might never read them. Jia sat in her quarters and thought about her mother, about the village, about all the people who had died. She touched the scars on her arms and made a promise. This ends soon, one way or another. Daeho stood on the bridge of Cascade's Revenge and looked at the stars. He thought about the small village that just wanted to farm and live in peace. He thought about how quickly that peace had been destroyed. He thought about what they had become. Are you ready? Hyun-Soo asked him. No, Daeho said honestly, but we're going anyway. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Raltos system. Ahead of them, the capital world glowed like a jewel. Cities covered its surface. Billions of Raltesh lived there, unaware that war was coming to their doorstep. The defense fleet moved to intercept. Warning signals filled the communication channels. The Raltesh were confused. These ships used Raltesh codes, but something was wrong. This is Daeho of Cascade Valley, he broadcast on all frequencies. You tried to erase us. You killed our families. You thought we were too weak to matter. Today you learn what happens when you underestimate humans. Then he gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. All ships, attack. The Battle of Raltos Prime had begun. Part 4, the space around Raltos Prime exploded with light and fire. The Raltesh defense fleet had 30 ships. They were large and powerful, built to intimidate and destroy. The Cascade Alliance fleet had 47 ships that were smaller but faster. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness. Deho watched from the bridge as plasma bolts crossed the void. 2 Raltesh destroyers fired at Cascade's Revenge. The shields held, but barely. Hyunsu's modifications were being tested in real combat for the first time. Return fire, Deho ordered. The upgraded weapons performed better than expected. The ancient technology combined with Raltesh engineering created devastating results. 1 destroyer's shields collapsed. The second shot tore through its hull. The ship broke apart, spilling atmosphere and bodies into space. Across the battlefield, the Alliance ships were proving themselves. A Velen crew destroyed a Raltesh cruiser with precise targeting. A Kel ship used its water cooling systems to fire continuously without overheating. The Drax modified control systems gave them faster reaction times, but they were still outnumbered, and the Raltesh fought desperately. An Alliance transport took a direct hit and exploded. 53 Velen fighters died in an instant. A human frigate lost its engines and drifted helplessly until a Raltesh destroyer finished it off. "We're losing too many ships," Hyunsu said. "We just need to break through to the planet," Deho replied. "That's all that matters." Haewon was working frantically at her station. "I'm uploading the virus into their defense grid now. If it works, their planetary weapons will go offline." "If?" Deho asked. "When?" She corrected herself, though her hands were shaking. The virus spread through the Raltesh systems like poison. One by one, the orbital defense platforms went dark. The planetary shield generators stuttered and failed. The Raltesh had become so dependent on their technology that they never imagined it could be turned against them. "Launch the ground assault," Deho ordered. Jia led the ground force. She had 20 dropships carrying 400 fighters. They screamed through the atmosphere toward the capital city. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky, but Haewon's virus had disabled most of it. Only half worked properly. 1 dropship took a hit and spun out of control. It crashed into a city building, killing everyone aboard. Jia watched it happen and forced herself to feel nothing. There would be time for grief later, if they survived. The dropships landed in the government district. Raltesh citizens ran screaming. They had never seen war on their own world before. They thought they were safe here. They were wrong. The Emperor's Guard responded quickly. These were the elite soldiers of the Empire, trained since birth to protect the capital. They wore heavy armor and carried powerful weapons. They had never lost a battle. They met the Alliance forces in the wide plaza in front of the Imperial Palace. The fighting was brutal and close. Plasma bolts filled the air. Bodies fell on both sides. The Raltesh were well trained and well equipped, but the Alliance forces were fighting for everything they had lost. Jia fought with cold fury. She moved through the battle like death itself. Every Raltesh that fell was 1 step closer to justice. A guard nearly killed her with a plasma blade, but a Velen warrior pushed her aside and took the blow instead. "He died saving her. Keep moving," she shouted. "Push forward." The battle spread through the city streets. Raltesh civilians were caught in the crossfire. Some died. Jia felt sick about it, but she couldn't stop. They had to reach the palace. In orbit, the space battle was reaching its conclusion. The Raltesh defense fleet was destroyed or scattered. Cascade's Revenge and the remaining Alliance ships held orbit over the capital. They could bombard the city if needed, but that wasn't the plan. They weren't here to destroy. They were here to conquer. Deho received reports from the ground. Jia's forces are at the palace gates. Heavy resistance. They need support. "Tell her help is coming," Deho said. He turned to his crew. "Prepare my shuttle." "I'm going down." Hyunsu looked at him in shock. "You're the fleet commander. You can't." "I'm also the man who started this," Deho said. "I need to finish it." The palace was an enormous structure of black stone and metal. It had stood for 500 years, a symbol of Raltesh power. Now it was under siege by the species they had enslaved and brutalized. The Emperor's Guard made their final stand at the throne room doors. 200 of the Empire's finest warriors formed a wall of armor and weapons. Behind them was the Empress Shaltix herself. The Emperor had died years ago and she ruled alone. Gia stood before them covered in blood and burns. Her forces had taken heavy casualties getting this far. Only 200 fighters remained from the 400 who landed. "Surrender," she called out. "You've lost. Your fleet is gone. Your capital is ours. Surrender and you'll be treated fairly." The guard commander stepped forward. "We do not surrender. We are Reltesh. We would rather die." "That can be arranged," Gia said coldly. The final battle for the palace was the bloodiest. The guard fought with fanatical devotion. They knew every corner of the building. They used every advantage. But the Alliance forces had something more powerful than training or equipment. They had nothing left to lose. Deho arrived with reinforcements halfway through the fight. He found Gia holding a corridor against 6 guards. He fought beside his daughter, both of them moving as one. They had lost so much together. They would finish this together. The throne room doors finally broke. The last of the Emperor's guard fell. Gia walked through the smoke and bodies into the heart of Reltesh power. Empress Shaltik sat on her throne, refusing to run. She was old but still intimidating. She had ruled for 30 years with an iron claw. She had ordered the deaths of billions. Now she faced the survivors of one small village. "You were supposed to be extinct," she said. Her voice held more curiosity than fear. Gia walked up to the throne, weapon raised. "We're humans. We don't extinct easily. What will you do now?" the Empress asked. "Kill me? Destroy this city? Become what you hate?" Deho stepped forward. "No. We'll give you something you never gave us. A trial. Justice. You'll face the consequences of your actions." "The fleet will return," Shaltik said. "Commander Vexel will crush you." Haywan entered the throne room holding a communication device. "Commander Vexel is dead. He committed suicide when he learned the capital had fallen. The frontier fleet is surrendering without him." The Empress's confidence crumbled. She suddenly looked very old and very small. "Take her into custody," Deho ordered. Taeyang's sacrifice at the frontier base had given them the time they needed. He and 50 volunteers had held off the Reltesh fleet for 3 days before being overwhelmed. Every one of them died. But their deaths had meaning. They had given the Alliance enough time to take the capital. Subin was already documenting everything. She recorded the fallen, the heroes, the moment when everything changed. Her cameras captured the Alliance flag being raised over the Imperial Palace. Gia stood on the palace balcony and looked out over the city. Fires burned in several districts. Bodies littered the streets. Victory had been expensive. 847 humans had died in the battle. Thousands more from the other species. Deho found her there. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "We won. We actually won. But it doesn't feel like I thought it would." "That's because you're still human," he said. "Still capable of feeling. That's what makes us different from them." Below them, Reltesh citizens watched in shock as their conquered capital became someone else's city. The impossible had happened. The Empire had fallen to the species it tried to erase. The galaxy would never be the same. Part 5. The trials began 3 months after the capital fell. They held them in the Imperial Palace itself. The same throne room where Reltesh emperors had ruled for centuries now became a courtroom. Representatives from every species the Reltesh had conquered came to watch. Some came to testify, others just came to see their oppressors face justice. Empress Shaltix was the first to stand trial. She sat in chains where her throne once stood. The accusations were read aloud. 300 planets enslaved, 12 billion beings killed or worked to death, 47 species nearly exterminated. The genocide of Cascade Valley. Deho testified about that day. He described the morning peace, the sudden bombardment, the screams, watching 89 people die in minutes, his wife's last breath. Every word was recorded by Subin for history. Gia testified about growing up in the tunnels, about learning to kill instead of farm, about losing her childhood to revenge and war. She spoke calmly, but her hands shook. The Velen testified about slavery, the Kel about forced labor underwater until they drowned from exhaustion, the Drax about being used as living computers. Every species had stories. Every story was worse than the last. Shaltik sat silently through it all. She didn't deny anything. When asked if she wanted to speak, she finally stood. "I did what I did for the Empire," she said, "to make us strong, to ensure our survival. I regret nothing." "That's your tragedy," Deho said. You still don't understand what you did wrong. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. But what would the punishment be? Some wanted execution. Others wanted life in prison. The Alliance Council debated for days. In the end, they chose imprisonment. Not because the Empress deserved mercy, but because they wanted to be better than the Empire had been. She would spend the rest of her life in a cell, forced to watch the peace she had tried to prevent. Investigator Kreshtal's trial was next. Unlike the Empress, she showed remorse. She testified about hunting humans in the tunnels, about the orders she had followed without question. I told myself I was just doing my job, she said. I didn't think about the people I was hunting. I didn't let myself think. But you're thinking now? Gia asked. Every day, Kreshtal said. And I'll think about it for the rest of my life. She received life imprisonment as well. The trials continued for months. Dozens of Raltesh officers and officials faced judgment. Some showed remorse. Most didn't. All faced consequences, but the trials were just the beginning. The real work was building something new. The Cascade Accords were signed 1 year after the capital fell. Every species in the Alliance agreed to them. The document established a new government based on equality and cooperation. No more empires. No more slavery. No more genocide. The Raltesh military was dissolved. Their weapons were destroyed or given to the Alliance Defense Force. Their factories were converted to produce civilian goods. It was painful for the Raltesh, but necessary. Deho addressed the galaxy from the palace balcony. Every species watched on screens across 1,000 worlds. We didn't come here to conquer, he said. We came to ensure this never happens again. Not to us, not to anyone. We're offering the Raltesh people a choice. Join us in building something better, or spend your lives bitter about what you lost. Choose wisely. Some Raltesh chose cooperation, mostly the young ones who were tired of war. Others chose bitterness and isolation. But slowly, very slowly, things began to change. The technology they had fought with was now shared freely. Hyunsu established an academy on Raltos Prime. It taught the ancient knowledge combined with modern science. Students from every species learned together. The first graduating class included both human and Raltesh engineers. Haywan built a communication network that connected all the Alliance worlds. Information flowed freely. No more secrets. No more isolated species. Everyone could talk to everyone. Subin published her history. She called it Cascade, a testament to survival. It became required reading in schools across the Alliance. Children learned about the small village that refused to die, about the people who chose justice over revenge. 5 years after the trials, the survivors returned to Talon 4. They stood in Cascade Valley for the first time since the bombardment. The land was still scarred. Black glass covered where fields had grown. The air still smelled wrong. We're going to rebuild it, Deho announced. Exactly as it was. They started with a memorial. The names of 89 dead were carved into a wall of metal that would never rust or fade. Deho's wife's name was first. Gia placed flowers there every morning while the construction continued. The new village rose slowly. They used materials from all the Alliance species. Velenstone. Kel water systems. Drax technology. Human determination. It was more than just rebuilding a village. It was a symbol of what they could create together. People came from across the galaxy to help. Former Raltesh soldiers worked alongside Velen farmers. Kel technicians taught human children. The village that once held 347 people grew to 5,000. Not just humans anymore. Everyone was welcome. Gia took over leadership when Deho retired. She was 33 years old and had fought in more battles than most soldiers twice her age. But she chose peace. She turned the valley into a center for agriculture and learning. The scars on her arms reminded her of war. The growing crops reminded her why peace mattered. Hyunsu continued his research until he died at age 70. His final project was a library containing all the knowledge of the ancient civilization, the Alliance species, and the lessons learned from the war. Knowledge is the best weapon against tyranny, he said, but only if it's shared. Subin kept documenting until she couldn't write anymore. Her final entry was written when she was 65. She described a day in Cascade Valley where Raltesh children played with human children, none of them remembering the war. This, she wrote, is what we fought for, not revenge. This. 10 years after the capital fell, Deho stood in Cascade Valley during a festival. Music played. People danced. Food from a dozen worlds was shared freely. Children ran and laughed without fear. A young Reltesh approached him. She couldn't have been more than 15. "Are you really him?" she asked. "The one who led the attack?" "Yes," Deho said. "They teach us about you in school. About what your people survived. About what my people did." She looked down. "I'm sorry. For what they did. For what happened to you." Deho looked at this child who hadn't even been born during the war, who carried guilt for crimes she didn't commit. "You're not responsible for the past," he said gently, "but you are responsible for the future. Make it better than what came before." She nodded and ran off to join her friends. Deho watched her go and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, Gia, found him there. "You're thinking about Mom?" "Always," he said, wondering if she'd be proud of what we built. "She'd be proud you chose to build instead of destroy," Gia said. "That's what makes us human. We can survive anything, but more importantly, we can choose to grow something good from the ashes." That night, Deho walked to the memorial. He touched his wife's name carved in metal. "We did it," he whispered. "They tried to erase us. They killed you and so many others. But we're still here, and we turned their capital into the heart of something better. We won not just the war, but the peace too." The valley was quiet except for distant music from the festival. Above, stars filled the sky. Somewhere out there, 1,000 worlds were learning to live together, learning to choose cooperation over conquest, learning the lesson that Cascade Valley had taught the hard way. You could try to erase humans. You could kill their people and burn their homes. You could bury them underground and hunt them in the dark. But you couldn't make them stop being human. And humans, when pushed far enough, would survive anything. They would build weapons from ancient secrets. They would unite enemies into allies. They would cross the galaxy to bring justice. And then after they won, they would choose mercy. They would build schools instead of prisons. They would share instead of hoard. They would remember the dead by creating a future worth living. That was the real power of humanity. Not that they could fight, not that they could survive, but that they could choose after everything to build something better. The village that was supposed to be erased became the symbol of a new age. The survivors who weren't supposed to exist became leaders. The war that seemed impossible to win became a peace worth protecting. Deho walked back toward the lights and music. Tomorrow he would work on expanding the academy. Next week there would be meetings about a new trading agreement. Life continued as it always did, but tonight he allowed himself to simply be grateful. For survival. For justice. For the chance to build instead of destroy. For being human. Commander Taewon Kim stood near the tall windows of the Celestial Concordance, watching ships come and go from the massive space station. His dress uniform felt tight around his shoulders. He hated these formal events. The diplomatic gala was in full swing behind him, filled with aliens from dozens of worlds. Their voices created a constant buzz of different languages and sounds. Taewon held a glass of something blue that tasted like lemons. He did not drink it. Instead, he stared at the stars and tried to ignore the party. His hand moved to his jacket pocket, touching the small photograph he kept there. 6 months had passed, but the pain felt fresh every day. "You should try to have fun," a voice said beside him. Lieutenant Daeun Choi appeared with 2 plates of food. She was his friend and worked in communications. Her smile was kind but worried. "Standing alone in the corner won't help." "I am fine," Taewon said quietly. "You are not fine," Daeun replied. She handed him a plate. "But you are here, and that counts for something. Haiwan would want you to keep living." Taewon looked at his friend. Daeun had known Captain Haiwan Park too. They all served together before the accident. Before the reactor breach. Before 18 crew members lived and 1 brave captain died. "I know," he said. The words felt empty. The center of the grand hall suddenly erupted with noise. Aliens of all species turned their heads and moved toward one area. Taewon saw what caused the excitement. Admiral Vekthar had entered the room. The Krithian warrior stood over 9 feet tall. His body was covered in a black shell that looked like armor but was actually his skin. 4 powerful arms hung at his sides. Each hand could crush steel. His face was angular and sharp, with 4 eyes that glowed orange. He moved like a predator, smooth and confident. "The undefeated," someone whispered near Taewon. Everyone knew the stories. Admiral Vekthar had won 300 duels. He never lost a fight. He led armies in the Outer Rim Wars and defeated enemies that others thought unbeatable. Krithians were already strong and fast, but Vekthar was special even among his own people. He was a living legend. The crowd surrounded him. Diplomats and officers from many worlds wanted to speak with him. They laughed at his jokes and listened to his stories. Vekthar seemed to enjoy the attention. His voice was deep and loud, carrying across the hall. "I should introduce you," Dawun said. "It would be good for your career." "No thank you," Taewon replied. "He is an important ally. The Krithians and humans need to work together." "Then you talk to him. I will stay here." Diane sighed but did not push further. She knew Taewon well enough. When he made up his mind, nothing changed it. For the next hour, Taewon watched from a distance. Vekthar told stories of his battles. He demonstrated fighting moves that made the crowd gasp. He spoke about warrior honor and the glory of combat. Other species treated him like royalty. Even the human officers seemed impressed and eager to please him. Taewon felt nothing but tired. He had seen real warriors. He served with them. Captain Park was worth 10 of this boastful admiral. She never talked about glory or honor. She just did her job and took care of her people. When the reactor started to fail, she stayed behind to seal the emergency doors. 18 people escaped because she gave them time. The explosion killed her instantly. That was real courage, not whatever this alien was selling to his admirers. Taewon decided to leave. He put his glass down and turned toward the exit. But before he could take 3 steps, a large shadow fell over him. "Leaving so soon, human?" Taewon looked up. Admiral Vekthar stood directly in front of him. The Krithian's 4 eyes studied him with interest. The crowd behind the admiral went quiet, watching. "The party is not for me," Taewon said simply. "I noticed you watching from the shadows," Vekthar said. His voice was curious, not angry. "You are military, yes? I can tell by how you stand. Commander Taewon Kim, Terran Defense Corps." "Ah, Earth Warriors." Vekthar's voice grew louder. "I have heard stories about humans. You are clever fighters. You use tactics and planning." The way he said it made tactics sound like cheating. "We do what works," Taewon replied carefully. "Interesting." Vekthar gestured to a nearby table. "Sit with me. I want to know more about human military thinking." It was not really a request. Declining would be rude, and rudeness at a diplomatic event could cause problems. Taewon followed the admiral to the table. Daeun caught his eye from across the room. Her expression said, "Be careful." Other officers joined them. A Velshari diplomat, a Zeldari commander, and 2 more humans that Taewon did not know well. They all wanted to hear Vekthar talk. The admiral was happy to oblige. "Strength is what matters in battle," Vekthar declared. "A true warrior faces his enemy directly. Krithians do not hide or use tricks. We fight with honor." "Every species fights differently," Taewon said. "There is no single way. But some ways are better," Vekthar insisted. "Physical power, speed, skill with weapons. These are universal truths. Your human bodies are small and weak, so you rely on clever tactics because you must." Several aliens nodded in agreement. The other human officers looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "Courage is not about size," Taewon said quietly. "No," Vekthar agreed, "but it helps to be strong." The conversation continued. Vekthar dominated it as he dominated everything. He told more war stories. He described battles in detail. He seemed to think war was glorious and beautiful. Taewon found it all tiresome. Then it happened. Taewon shifted in his seat and the small photograph slipped from his jacket pocket. It fell onto the table face up. Before he could grab it, Vekthar's hand shot out. The admiral picked up the photo with surprising gentleness. "Who is this?" Vekthar asked, studying the image. The photograph showed a woman in uniform. She was smiling at the camera, her eyes bright with life. Captain Haiwan Park on her promotion day. Taewon remembered taking that picture. He remembered how proud she looked. "A friend," Taewon said, reaching for the photo. Vekthar held it away, still looking. "She wears a captain's insignia. Was she your commander?" "Yes. She looks strong for a human female." "Is she stationed here?" The table went silent. Taeyun, who had moved closer, froze. "She died 6 months ago," Taewon said. His voice was steady but cold. "May I have the photograph back?" Vekthar looked at Taewon with those 4 orange eyes. Something in the admiral's expression changed. Curiosity became something else. Something that Taewon did not like. "How did she die?" Vekthar asked. Taewon wanted to refuse to answer. But everyone was watching now. Walking away would create a scene. Reactor breach, he said. She stayed behind to seal the containment doors. She saved her crew. He held out his hand for the photograph. Vekthar looked at the image once more, then handed it back. Taewon carefully put it back in his pocket, his hand shaking slightly. The Admiral's expression was unreadable. The moment stretched out, uncomfortable and strange. Then Vekthar spoke again, and everything changed.